We're bringing baby backs back, man. This deserves its place in the barbecue world.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back for another video. In today's video, I'm going to show you a rib cooking technique that's going to allow you to not have to wake up super early in the morning just to cook ribs just for kickoff on Sundays. If you guys started learning how to barbecue like me, you kind of have this sort of innate idea of what a cooking schedule looks like, especially if you're doing things like ribs and brisket. You know, usually it's I'm gonna cook the brisket the day before, and then I have to wake up super early the next morning to get ribs on. That way I can make sure everything stays as fresh as possible. While I agree that is the freshest way that you can get ribs, but it's also the most difficult. You're still working off of not having enough sleep the day before, especially if for whatever reason your brisket cook on went on a little bit longer than you expected, and just waking up to start a fire in the morning and putting on ribs is one of my least favorite things to do in barbecue. But with today's video, I'm going to show you guys a way so that you don't have to do that anymore. And I really learned how to do this from doing a bunch of pop-ups and being the only person who's cooking for my events and working for 72 hours and only getting like 10 hours of sleep within 3 days kind of spread throughout is not a good thing, and it is not sustainable, so I do not encourage that at all. While sometimes you may have to do that when you're hustling in the beginning, that's not what I want to do when I just want to cook food for a football game. So if that interests you, stick around and I'll show you guys your new favorite method of cooking ribs. All right, so let's just get our baby back ribs seasoned up. And with this rib, we're trying to keep it pretty simple. The cooking process itself is probably the easiest thing that I've done. All right, so all we're gonna do is simply just season it with a little bit of salt and black pepper for right now. This baby back rib, the membrane is pulled off. The conversation is always, whether or not you need to pull off the membranes. I haven't pulled off membranes on ribs in years. Whether or not you need to take it off really depends on how you like to cook, how hot you're cooking, whether it's direct heat or if it's indirect. The more direct heat, sometimes it can get a little bit more leathery. So it's just kind of something that you have to kind of play around with and see how your cooker cooks and see how you like your ribs turning out. I personally like keeping the membrane on because I feel like it tells me a story of how the ribs are cooking. The way that the color of the membrane takes on from the smoke and the heat, how it feels, and how much liquid it's pooling, especially for, not necessarily for baby back ribs, but for like spare ribs. So that's it. All we're doing is salt and pepper, and this is going straight in the smoker. So with these ribs, I'm going to throw them closer to the front of the pit because I want it to be a little bit hotter. These ribs are a little bit more forgiving than St. Louis and spare ribs, in my opinion. They can take a little bit more heat. I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe I'm just making it up, I don't know, but that's what I just feel like I've noticed. That's it. We're gonna keep this in the front, and we're gonna keep this pit probably around, I would say 300 or so. In terms of prep, in terms of like the meat itself, that's it. I mean, we didn't even trim it. All we did was salt and pepper, and we're throwing in like the hottest part of the smoker because we just wanted to get done as quickly as possible. These will probably go anywhere between, I would say, 2.5 hours to 4 hours. It kind of depends on the size of the rib. You also might need to flip it if one side is getting done faster than the other. I just really like the texture that it gets being on the hottest part of the smoker. It gets a little bit more convection up front, and I don't know, I feel like it just kind of builds a nice texture to it. I feel like the only thing that you can do wrong in this step is kind of forgetting that your ribs are in there and overcooking it. We want to cook them probably like 80% of the way, so they're fully cooked and almost as if if we left it on for another 30 more minutes or so, they'd be perfectly ready to go and ready to eat. I promise you guys, after you practice this a couple times, those early days of waking up at like 4 or 5 in the morning just to get ribs ready done for lunch, those days are over. So with these ribs, again, we're not going to spritz them, we're not going to check on them, we're not going to do anything other than make sure that fire stays nice and hot for the next, again, 2.5 to 4 hours or so. All right, guys, so it's been about 3 hours, and I think we are ready to pull these things off. So you guys look at this rib right here. It's got great color, and this is just salt, pepper, and smoke, right? There's nothing else on here. There's no paprika. There's no spritz. There's nothing. This is just it. As we squeeze it, I don't know if you guys can see, but there's some juices running. That's what we're looking for. I would say this is done, but I would say for my perfect doneness, if I were just to eat this, I would let it go for another, I don't know, like 20, 30 minutes or so. This is our biggest one right here, and this is this is exactly where we wanted to be, where it's still pretty firm, nice and juicy, but it's not falling apart. This is the smallest one. I would say this one is probably done. I think even after we chill it overnight, it'll be perfectly fine to slice up. But yeah, the other two will definitely be in a better position for the process that we're doing. So that's pretty much for today. I mean, really, it was just, again, it was just no trim, salt, pepper, just a lot of smoke, like higher temperature heat. 3 hours later, these ribs are done for what we need today. And I'll show you guys how I like to reheat these ribs and kind of give you guys a couple options of how to do so. Other than that, that's it for today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. All right, guys, so now that we got our ribs all done and they're just going to cool down, and then we're gonna let them sit in the fridge overnight. And while we do that, we're gonna make ourselves a bourbon maple barbecue sauce. The ribs itself, there's not that much going on. I mean, it's salt, pepper, and smoke, but I figured just because we kept that part super simple, let's try to mix up a bit with the sauce. All right, just to start, we're gonna add about 1/4 cup of bourbon. I would say don't use anything that's super nice. Before we start to do anything, we're going to make sure we burn off the alcohol. So the burner right now is not on. We're gonna keep that off, and we're just going to light this. But before we light this thing on fire, please make sure there's nothing above it. You're not leaning on top of it. You don't have hair or your apron hanging over it, just because we want to be safe while we're doing so. And there it goes. I don't know if you guys can see that on camera, but it is currently on fire. And we just want to make sure we burn off all this alcohol, because you know what? We want to also make this kid friendly, and we don't want anybody getting drunk off of eating our ribs. Ooh, there you go. Now you can start to see on camera a little bit better. Shout outs to my guy Heifer, Sean Heifer, for giving me kind of his version of this sauce. So I'm not going to make a complete copy of it. I don't even know if I can. His is pretty good. He's a guy in Chicago on the south side. So if you guys are looking for some barbecue down there, check him out at Heifer's Barbecue. Go follow him on Instagram. Yep, this is why I said make sure there's nothing on top, because these flames are pretty high right now. We got all this bourbon burned off, so no more flames. And now we're gonna add the rest of the components to this barbecue sauce. We're gonna add about the same amount of maple syrup as we did with the bourbon. So again, about 1/3 cup or so. There is some brown sugar that I probably will add in towards the end, but I don't want to put too much sweetness in here, because the bourbon, as it cooks down, is going to pull out a lot of the sweet flavors. We're also getting a lot sweeter from the maple, so I want to make sure we add in all the other components first before we add in the brown sugar to kind of balance it out, the same way that you would do kind of with salt at the end of a dish. We're going to add about 1 cup of ketchup, a little less than that of apple cider vinegar, some black pepper, a little bit of garlic, and some cayenne pepper. Even though the top of this thing says thyme. Oh man, I took the top off of this thing. Gotta be careful. Flashbacks to competing on Chopped right here. We're gonna turn the heat on this sucker, give it a good mix. So I just kind of tasted it real quick, and you know, definitely the ketchup and the apple cider vinegar are coming through. I get a little bit of that granulated garlic, getting those hints of that bourbon as well. But the one thing that I am missing is sweetness. So man, this is why I hate making barbecue sauces, because I just hate to see how much sugar goes into making a good barbecue sauce. Man, this is also why I don't really like making barbecue sauce, because it's not good for you guys. It's not good for you. Yeah, there you go. That's what I'm looking for. But I want a little bit more savoriness before I add some salt, so I'm gonna add just a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, just a little bit. The sauce is starting to get a little bit thicker, which is nice, but it's not so thick that it's just gonna, you know, just be a clump on top of my ribs. All right, so barbecue sauce is done, and this will continue to thicken up just a little bit. Once it's cooled down, we'll put it in some containers and let it chill overnight. All right, folks, so here are our ribs, and as you guys can see, they're very, very stiff. That's actually a good thing. They're cold and they were breaking, then we definitely overcooked them. For this, I would say use a chef's knife. I think a serrated knife, especially on cold meat like this, can shred up your meat just a little bit. And this is one of those cases where you want to use the full length of your blade, get nice clean edges. These ribs right here are still really nice and tender. Look at the complexity of like the rib. You can see all the different types of muscle structures that are inside this baby back rib too. There's just a lot going on, which is why I think I personally like the flavor of this rib, because there are different textures. There's a lot of this intermuscular fat that's going on, and I'll just show you guys right now. just eating it cold, like it's super tender right there. Like that's great. Even this just being cold and just with salt and pepper and just smoke, man, it is fantastic, guys. Bringing back baby backs. So up to this point, you know, it's really kind of up to you how you want to reheat these ribs. Put them on the offset side of it and just kind of warm it up. And then once it's warmed through thoroughly, and just kind of mark them on the grill, or put them on a baking sheet and just throw in the oven and warm all the way through about like 275 at 300 for, you know, 30 minutes, maybe an hour if you got a bunch of them going. And after that, they're just fully cooked and super easy. Just for the purpose of this video, let's do both. I'm going to show you guys what it's like when you do it just in the oven and then also doing it on the grill. We got our fire going, and we're playing around with those new Fogo briquettes. I don't want to put them directly over the fire right now just because I don't want it to kind of char on the outside and be cold in the middle. Close this up, and temp wise, I would say we're probably hovering about 300 or so. All right guys, so it's been about 30 minutes or so, and just take a look at these ribs. Nice and juicy. They're warmed through. Now we're gonna bring these over and we're just gonna give them a nice markup on the sides. And you know, the one thing that I love about this method is the fact that you can get more texture on those ribs and the sides like you wouldn't be able to do before. They're like looking like grilled pork chops. It looks awesome. I don't know if you guys can see that's kind of dark, but it's got some great texture on the side. It's nice and crispy. So these are looking pretty good, so I'm gonna pull these things off and let's go inside and sauce these things up. All right, folks, so this one, I don't know if you guys can even tell the difference, but this is the one that's off the grill. This one that we took off in the oven, and they were roughly around the same time. Here's our sauce. I warmed it back up again. Looking for that sauce to be thick enough to where it'll coat the rib, but thin enough to where, you know, all the excess will run off and it'll coat the rib completely. So we'll take this rib and then we're just going to dunk it and boom, shake off the excess. Now you have this beautiful rib with this sheen on it, with all of the sauce covered on all sides, not just on that top like you would normally get if you're just saucing an entire rack of rib. And let's give it a taste test. Oh yeah, look at that. That's hot. But guys, this is the reason why I started changing my ribs, and you get more sauce coverage. And that's also the reason why when I serve ribs this way, I never serve extra cups of sauce. I really think that you shouldn't need any more sauce in this, no matter how good the sauce can be. Look at that, guys. We're bringing baby backs back, man. This deserves its place in the barbecue world. Definitely underrated. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that rib video. I know it's a little bit different. This technique isn't just really meant for you not having to cook that much before watching a game. This technique was huge for me when I was doing pop-ups. I would have these long days of, you know, a couple days before the actual event, I'd be doing prep and then trimming, and then I would have one whole day dedicated to just cooking brisket, and then it would have to be, you know, take a couple hours of sleep and then go back and cook ribs before the event actually started. And I was kind of like, I'm done with it. I don't want to do that anymore. And that's why this technique is something that I've been practicing a lot. This technique specifically works really well for baby back ribs. I've tried it with spare ribs. It doesn't work as good. St. Louis cut a little bit better, but by far out of those three cuts, the baby backs work the best. So like I said multiple times in this video, let's bring baby backs back because they are delicious. That's the end of this video. I hope this video kind of gives you some encouragement of how you can cook really good ribs on days where you're really busy and you're trying to serve ribs in the middle of the day. And if you guys are also looking for 2 convenient ways to cook brisket and wings for game day, I'll leave these 2 videos up here for you guys to check out. And if you guys like this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys in the next one.